Where is the place that you're naked, exposed, and the most fragile? Yep, the locker room. What's the scariest thing to ever happen to you inside the locker room? Put it in the comments below. So let's grab a blanket, turn off your lights for true scary stories that happened inside the locker room, the place where you don't even have your underwear on.
Whose dad is that? My encounter takes place during my freshman year of high school. I had been a swimmer for most of my life. It seemed that as soon as I learned to float, my parents started signing me up for community youth swim teams. I loved it too. I liked the independence that came with the sport. I didn't have to rely on my teammates come race time. It was just me. I come from a rather small town, so naturally, our high school was small as well. It didn't have the kind of money to have its own swimming pool, so we had our practices at the community center, something along the lines of a YMCA. The beginning of the season went really well. I was getting some of my best times in my races, and it was really boosting my self-confidence. This was also around the time that I was realizing that I was gay. Given that I am from a small town, I used to put a lot of pressure on myself to be something better than my sexuality. So, my swimming achievements were that for me. Things started happening after my third meet of the year. We had competed against a team from a nearby, larger city. I remember always being jealous of the teams from the big cities, thinking that they were around more open-minded people. After the meet, when I was at home dicking around on Facebook, I got a friend request and a message from someone that I did not recognize. It was a boy. His name on Facebook was Devin, and the message said, "You're cute." I responded with a flirty little thanks with a smiley face at the end, but also asked him who he was. He said he was from the team I had swam against earlier that day. I accepted his request and scrolled through the little bit that was his profile. I just figured he was new to the website. He only had one picture, his profile picture, and a couple friends. No posts or wall rights or anything like that. I did recognize him as one of the members of the other team, and I remember feeling pretty excited that someone had taken interest in me. I also didn't think it was too weird that he had found me, because programs with swimmers' names were given out at competitions. I was a naive teenager, let's not judge, okay? So, for the next week, Devin and I started talking every day. We traded phone numbers and began texting constantly. We would talk about everything: school, swim, family, friends, how we were coping with being gay, etc. We even began talking on the phone. His voice sounded a little mature, and he just assured me that cell phones distort how people really sound. I put a lot of trust into him. He had a way of easing conversations out of me. Again, now, please remember how young and innocent and stupid I was. In hindsight, these were obviously big red flags. So, during our swim practice a couple weeks later, me and a few of other teammates noticed how some strange guy standing by the locker room door, looking down on his phone. We saw him, and he caught our attention for some reason. Now, he was a chunkier guy wearing sweats, a zip-up jacket, and a ball cap. He seemed to be in his mid-40s. We just assumed he was some parent that was waiting for his kid to finish practice. Me and one of my friends joked that the guy was some creeper instead. In the end, we were right. Practice ended after some time, and because it was a community pool, we had to haul in the lane ropes at the end of every single practice. So, the geriatric water aerobics class would have enough time to kick around. I volunteered to help my coach this time, and everyone else had gone into the locker rooms. The lane ropes didn't take too long, maybe 10 minutes. But by the time I got to the locker room, most of my team was heading out. When you walk into the locker room from the pool, the first thing you see is 2 current shower stalls to the left. One opens to the changing area, and the shower is behind it. Past the stalls and around the turn are the locker areas. Immediately, when I walked into the locker room, I felt uneasy. I walked past the showers quickly, trying to shake off my weirded out feelings. When I rounded the corner into the locker area, I saw the man from the pool deck sitting on one of the benches by my locker. Except this time, he was sitting in just his underwear. I avoided looking at him and just wanted to grab my things and head to the shower, but I could literally feel his eyes burning holes into my skin from staring so hard. I brushed it off again, telling myself that he was just some weirdo guy. I grabbed my towel and went back to the shower area to rinse the chlorine off of my body. I mean, at that moment, at that very moment that day, if I had the smarts that I do have now, I would have just gone the fuck out of there. About halfway through my shower, someone got into the stall next to me. Now, these were the typical bathroom type stalls that had a small gap underneath and stood about 6 feet tall, to where you could see the other shower heads in the row of stalls. Everything else in the locker room was quiet. My teammates had left, and as far as I knew, no one besides that man was in the room. I knew, at that moment, it was him as soon as he stepped in. I stopped showering to just listen to him. He never turned the shower on. After a few moments, I heard some consistent slop, slop, slop noise, followed by low, staggered moans. He was in the stall right next to me, beating off, disgusted, and starting to feel really scared. I turned my shower off and grabbed my towel, ready to get the heck out of there. Now, like I briefly mentioned in my description of the shower stalls, there were 2 little rooms stacked behind each other. The first was the changing room, with the curtain separating it from the locker room, and the shower behind it, which was a curtain separating it from the changing room. I was drying off in the shower section when, at the moment, I heard the current to the changing room shuffle. He was in the first room. I peeked through a small crack in the curtain and saw him standing there, pants around his knees, penis in hand, staring at me through the curtain. "It's good to finally meet you, Neil," he said. It didn't even take a second for me to register that I'd heard that voice before. It was the same voice that Devin had on the phone. My heart felt like it stopped beating, and I immediately felt dizzy. Every single hair on my body stood on end. My mouth opened to scream, but nothing came out. His 2 fingers poked through the side of the curtain, and he threw it open. He was now standing not even 5 feet in front of me, nothing separating us now. All I could do was clutch harder onto my towel around my waist and back further and further into a corner. Just as the sick perv started leaning in closer, I found my voice at that moment and let out the loudest scream I'd ever created. This finally scared him off, as he pulled up his pants and scurried back towards the lockers. I ran back through the door to the pool deck, where my coach was still hanging around. She saw the look of panic on my face and asked what was wrong. I told her the truth. I told her that there was someone in the locker rooms, and she walked in with me to check it out. In the end, we didn't see anyone, and she assured me that I was okay. She asked me what had happened, and I cowered and said that he just made me feel uncomfortable. She didn't really pry much after that comment. I guess I was afraid to tell her or anyone the real truth because I was afraid of outing myself at the time. Obviously, in hindsight, that brief adjustment period would have been nothing compared to the years of anxiety I had after that incident. I eventually quit the swim team. And in general, avoid locker rooms now. So the night after the incident, Devin texted me like nothing had happened that day. He knew I connected everything, and I assumed he was trying to protect himself. I texted him back that if he texted me anymore, I would get the cops involved. Looking back, I wish I had done more. I had his number and could have easily had him caught. It makes me sick to think about anyone else that he could have contacted that could have been avoided had I braved up that day. I also still get goosebumps when I think about the conversations that we had and how I had built up such a level of comfort with this monster. So, pervy man stalking boys in the locker room. Let's not meet. Someone came in after hours looking for me while I hid. So, I am pretty new here. And one of the things that brought me to the site is that I actually have a handful of creepy encounters that I've read for a while and posted just a few times, but I'm finally willing to share some of my stories. I used to work at a privately owned gym in the middle of a somewhat sketchy town, and as a very small 21-year-old girl, I closed by myself at 9 or 10 at night, depending on the day of the week. Now, everyone kind of knew each other. I was either friends or good acquaintances with a lot of the members, so mostly everyone knew that I was there by myself at night. In retrospect, my mother hated this and freaked out pretty often about the fact that I was by myself. So, one night I was closing up and I got mostly everything done ahead of time because it wasn't really busy. I forgot to lock the door, but once I realized it, I thought, I'm just leaving in just a few minutes. I'll just finish up and quickly and get out of there, right? So I went down the hallway to the locker rooms and cleaned out the trash cans, went back to the front and noticed it was about 15 to 20 minutes after closing. I thought it was strange that someone was parked outside the door that was not there before. Now, at that moment, I contemplated my options when I saw the car shut off. I could run to get the keys and attempt to lock the door before the person directly in front of the door got to it, which was downright impossible, or I could hide. I had already flipped the breakers to turn off the upstairs lights. The upstairs consisted of a room with a tanning room, a multi-purpose workout room. I obviously opted for the room with a door and a lock, and crouched down in the dark beside the tanning bed, pulled out my cell phone and quietly called my mom. I know, your first thought was, why not call 911, right? First of all, I had no idea who this person was and thought at the time it easily could have been a member who had simply forgotten something and came back to get it. I recognized that. I should have called the cops, but at that moment, I was so afraid of it being something completely harmless and embarrassing myself in the end of it, filling out incident reports, doing the whole hassle thing, getting questioned by cops, etc., all that stuff. I did not want to do that. Anyways, at the moment, I call my mom and I can hear someone entering the building. I'm whispering very quietly, telling her to please come quick. I hear walking and movement downstairs, and my heart absolutely dropped when I heard the person coming up the stairs. I remember feeling like I was in a scary movie because I'm hiding in the dark room from this mysterious person, hearing the floor creak right outside the room I was hiding in. And this person starts calling for me by name. He would say, "My name. Where are you? Are you here?" The crazy thing was, it was not a voice I recognized at all. Between all the members, my boss, etc., that could have been there. I realized this This was not someone I knew, or at least was not someone I spoke to regularly at the gym. A few minutes went by eventually, of me being absolutely quiet, too afraid to speak or even make a sound, a ruffle, anything. Terrified and listening intently to this person look for me. I heard footsteps going back down the stairs. My mom called me a few minutes later, saying she had pulled in. No cars here, but the door propped open. My mom runs into the building and tells me not to move from my spot until she has knocked and assured me that it is her. When we returned downstairs, I realized nothing was missing. Things were just moved from their original spots. For instance, the phone I had left on the counter was in the room with the exercise machines. My boss didn't have cameras set up, so I never did figure out who this person was or even what they wanted. But I did refuse to ever be there alone again, especially at night. Now, I no longer work there anymore, but creepy, mysterious guy, let's not ever meet. Creep in the hot tub. This was a very long time ago. When I was about 16 years old, I worked for the local YMCA as a lifeguard. We had a pool on the main deck, and then a small hot tub that was in a VIP type locker room. The pool was small and never had many people in it, so I often would work shifts alone. Well, right when I started working there, my boss warned me about this one guy. We'll call him Dave. Apparently, our friend Dave liked to hit on all the female employees and the members, would watch the girls in the workout room and pool, stand outside the changing room doors, and just, in general, was a creepy middle-aged guy. So, this one day I'm working by myself, and I go to check the chemicals in the hot tub, when who should I find out but Dave? I quickly grab my water sample and start to head back for the main area when he started to call after me, pretty loudly too. "Excuse me, I just want to tell you that you're a very beautiful girl." Now at this moment, attempting to be polite, I just did nothing. I just smiled and said thanks. And then that's when he got super creepy. At that moment, he began telling me over and over again just how sexy I was and how I should join him in the hot tub because we could really have some fun. Now, I was extremely freaked out, so I told him something along the lines of, "That is very inappropriate, sir. I am a minor." His response, "I don't mind if you're underage. I can treat you like a woman." I got the heck out of there. Worst part is, my boss did nothing about the situation, and he is still, to this day, a member there. The Creeper and the Quiet One. It was the year 1992. I attended LaGuardia Middle College HS in Queens, New York. It was a high school that allowed students to take college courses. There, I would hang out with these two cool college chicks and became friends with a guy named Paul. Now, Paul was a short dude in his late 20s with a push broom mustache and looked and sounded like the Family Guy's Cleveland. He was the manager at Wendy's on Northern Boulevard. He tried to get me to smoke weed with him, but I didn't do that shit till I was in my 20s. He told me I was cool enough to get a position there, and a month into the job, I became pretty popular. Paul would praise me when he made me Employee of the Month. That's when people got suspicious. Paul's behavior in front of me would be flamboyant, and he would talk about sexual things. Now, I was 16 years old, and it came to me he was gay. During this time, my girlfriend was a 16-year-old model for some rinky-dink take-your-money TV agency scam for teenage models, but gorgeous nonetheless and had presence, and would swing by to have lunch with me. Paul sees her and says, "Is that your girl?" I respond, "Yes." He says, "Did you fuck her yet?" And I said, "It's none of your business." He says playfully, "You didn't fuck her because you ain't got no dick." So my ego came out and said, "My shit is probably bigger than yours." Then he gets sassy and says, let me see it, you ain't got no dick." He shut up after a while and we continued working. It made me feel uncomfortable, but I shook it off. A week later, I started catching hints that my boss is a chicken hawk, so I would make out with my girl while he looked, so he can get the message on my sexual preference at the moment. I needed the job still, though. This actually made things worse. I go to the locker room one day, and Paul says to me, "You got lipsticks on your lips, papi chulo. Let me wipe that off, stay still." And in an attitude, I scream, "No, fuck off." He changes his tone and under his breath says, "Fucking tease." I felt extremely creeped out by this. The whole week following, Paul does not talk to me, and little by little cuts my nighttime hours, and threatens to make me work in the morning on Saturdays. So, he eventually hires some black kid he met in a basketball court. The kid was built like a boxer, ripped abs and a chiseled chest, and he replaces my shift with his and tells me he was deathly quiet and spoke and mostly listened. Paul called him the quiet one. I could care less, and he tells me, "You know, you're gonna open tomorrow morning," which pissed me off because I would have to open at 6:30 on a Saturday morning after working past midnight. Paul and the new kid worked the graveyard shift that night, and I thought it was suspicious. The next morning, I dreaded going to work. The sun has not even broke on the chilly spring day. It was at that moment that I looked and saw, and I noticed 5 cop cars and an NYPD ESU, Emergency Service Unit, truck parked in front of my job. A patrolman gets a yellow tape and starts blocking the street. I tell the cop who I am, and one detective tells me, "This is a crime scene." At that moment, I thought they got robbed and killed, but what happened was much darker. From what a coworker told me, Paul kept the new kid working till 3 and followed him into the locker room. He watched the kid remove his shirt and walk to him and told him he was bleeding from his bare back. Paul bit his back playfully, and the new kid unleashed hell on him. For 3 hours, the kid beat Paul, burned him with a stove, and kicked all his teeth in. The kid was in a troubled youth program and had almost killed Paul for fracturing his face and jaw. Paul was in the hospital for 6 months due to a spleen rupture and multiple fractures. Later that day, detectives from the police precinct came down to my house and took a statement. I told them that Paul was a creeper.